My name is Alice Carter, and what I'm about to share changed everything I thought I knew about prayer, faith, and the nature of reality itself. Before my near-death experience, I was what you might call a lukewarm Christian, someone who believed in God, attended church occasionally, and prayed mostly when I needed something. Prayer to me was a ritual, a habit I had learned as a child but never truly understood. I would bow my head, say a few words, and then move on with my day. I never questioned whether my prayers had power or whether they even made a difference. That all changed on the morning of October 12th, 2023. It was a crisp autumn Thursday, and I was on my way to work at Riverside Medical Center, where I worked as a respiratory therapist. The golden sun had just begun to rise, casting long shadows over the quiet roads. I took a sip from my travel mug, savoring the warmth of the coffee as I mentally ran through my schedule for the day. One of my patients, little Michael, had been on my mind a lot lately. He was a 7-year-old boy in the pediatric ward, struggling with severe asthma. Despite his condition, he always had a bright smile and a hopeful spirit. I had prayed for him the night before, but if I were honest, it had been a quick, half-hearted prayer. I was so lost in thought that I never saw the truck coming. Later, I would learn that the driver, a man named Mark Reynolds, had been working a double shift and had fallen asleep at the wheel. His 18-wheeler drifted across the median at full speed, heading straight for my car. The impact was catastrophic. From what the emergency responders later told me, my car was crushed almost beyond recognition. The front end folded in on itself like paper, the windshield shattered into 1,000 tiny shards, and the airbags deployed with explosive force. They assumed that whoever had been inside couldn't have survived, and for a while, they were right. For exactly 7 minutes and 42 seconds, I was clinically dead. But those 7 minutes contained an eternity of revelation, an experience that shattered my previous understanding of faith and prayer, leaving me forever changed. Oddly, I don't remember pain. I don't remember the moment my bones broke or the sensation of my body being thrown against the seatbelt. Instead, there was a flash of blinding light, followed by a sudden and overwhelming sense of peace, a peace so deep and profound that it was unlike anything I had ever known. Then I felt it, a pulling sensation, as if I were being lifted out of my body, higher and higher, until the wreckage of my car, the flashing red and blue lights of the ambulance, and the frantic movements of the paramedics faded from view. I was no longer on the road. I was no longer in my body. I had crossed into something else, a place beyond time, beyond space, beyond anything I had ever imagined. It was not heaven in the way we often picture it. There were no golden gates or angelic choirs. Instead, I found myself in what I can only describe as a space between spaces, a dimension of pure consciousness where everything was light, energy, and understanding. It was here that I would come to see prayer itself, not as mere words whispered into the void, but as a living force that shapes reality in ways far greater than we can comprehend. And it was here that I met Gabriel, the being of light who would show me the true power of prayer, a power that I had, until that moment, utterly underestimated. This is my story. The moment I left my body, I felt as if I had stepped into a dimension beyond time and space. Everything around me pulsed with light, yet it wasn't blinding. Instead, it was warm and alive, radiating a peace deeper than anything I had ever known. I looked down and saw the scene below, my crushed car, the flashing lights of ambulances and fire trucks, the first responders working frantically to revive me. I saw my own body, lifeless, mangled, trapped in the wreckage. Yet I felt no fear, no pain, no attachment to it. Instead, I felt drawn upward, as if an invisible force was pulling me towards something far greater. Suddenly, the space around me shifted. I was no longer above the accident, but standing in what I can only describe as a realm of pure consciousness. It wasn't a place made of buildings or landscapes, but rather an endless expanse of light, energy, and flowing movement. The air itself shimmered, filled with something I could only describe as living music, harmonies that resonated within me rather than through sound. Then I saw them. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Countless threads of light stretched in every direction, intertwining like an infinite tapestry. Each thread pulsed with its own color and rhythm, weaving through the air as if part of a vast, unseen structure. Some were bright and strong, glowing like golden beams of pure energy. Others were faint, flickering as if struggling to remain lit. Then suddenly I knew. These were prayers. They weren't just words spoken into silence. They were living forces, tangible and real, each one traveling toward its destination. Some moved with great power, surging forward like unstoppable currents. Others barely made it past the spiritual barrier, their energy weak and scattered. As I stood in awe, taking in this breathtaking reality, I became aware of a presence beside me. He wasn't like the angels I had imagined growing up. He had no wings, no flowing robes. Instead, he appeared as a being of radiant light, powerful yet gentle, his form shifting between something visible and something purely energetic. I didn't hear his voice with my ears, yet his words resonated directly within my consciousness. "You have been chosen to witness this," he said, "because your understanding needs to grow, and through you, others will learn." I knew without needing to be told that this was Gabriel. He gestured toward the endless network of light around us. "This is the web of prayer," he explained. "Every sincere prayer ever spoken is woven into this structure. Prayer is not just asking, it is participating in the fundamental creative force of the universe." I watched as he directed my attention to a particular thread of golden light. "Look," he said. The thread led me to a woman kneeling beside a hospital bed. She was crying, holding the hand of her sick child. I recognized her immediately, though I had never met her before. She was in Brazil, thousands of miles from where my body lay in the wreckage. Her child had been battling a severe illness, and she was praying with every ounce of faith she had left. As I watched, something extraordinary happen. Her prayer didn't just disappear into the air. Instead, it flowed upward, merging with the web of light. It traveled through the vast network, reaching places and people she could never have imagined. I saw how it influenced the thoughts of a doctor in the next room, suddenly reminding him of a similar case from years ago, leading to a crucial diagnosis. I saw how it strengthened the child's immune system, a surge of energy moving through his body at a cellular level. I saw how it inspired a nurse who had been contemplating quitting her job to stay and offer the extra care this child needed. It was all connected. Gabriel turned to me. "This is the power of prayer. It is not a mere wish, it is an active force, shaping reality in ways beyond human understanding." I felt my mind racing, trying to take it all in. "So, every prayer has an effect?" "Every sincere prayer," he corrected. "Some prayers are weak, scattered, or insincere. Those do not carry the same strength." He gestured again, and I saw something heartbreaking. Prayers that barely made an impact. Some dissipated into nothingness, while others flickered and faded before reaching their intended destination. "These are prayers spoken without faith," Gabriel explained. "Prayers that are routine, empty repetitions, or self-centered. They hold no real power because they are not aligned with God's will." I watched as some prayers, though spoken with urgency, lacked conviction. I saw others that were entirely selfish, asking for things without thought of others. These prayers remained dim, unfocused, and weak. Then Gabriel showed me something else. Prayers spoken with true faith. These were unstoppable, cutting through the barriers of the spiritual realm, like arrows of light. They moved with divine precision, striking their mark and setting off chain reactions of change. "This is why some prayers move mountains," Gabriel said, "while others barely lift the dust." I was speechless. I had never prayed like this before. For the first time, I realized how casual, even careless my prayers had been. I thought back to all the times I had prayed out of habit, all the times I had doubted whether my prayers even mattered. And yet, before me was undeniable proof. They mattered more than I had ever imagined. Gabriel then pointed towards something even greater, a massive convergence of light unlike anything I had seen. "This is what happens when many pray together," he said. "Collective prayer amplifies the effect, creating waves of transformation that reach across the world." I saw groups of people, some gathered in churches, some praying in their homes, some even praying in different languages and traditions. All of their prayers intertwining and growing stronger together. One particular thread caught my attention. A group of people praying for peace in a war-torn country. Their prayers formed a massive network of golden white light, influencing thoughts and emotions of those in positions of power. I watched in amazement as brain chemistry literally shifted in key decision makers, reducing aggression and increasing empathy. This is why Jesus said, "Where two or three gather in my name, there am I with them," Gabriel said. The power of collective prayer opens channels for divine intervention in ways that individual prayers sometimes cannot. Tears filled my eyes. I had never understood prayer like this before. I had never imagined that every sincere prayer was part of something so much bigger than myself. And I knew in that moment that I would never pray the same way again. For what felt like an eternity, I stood in awe, watching the web of light, the living tapestry of prayer weaving through existence. But Gabriel wasn't finished. "Come," he said, his voice resonating deep within my soul. "There is more you must see." Before I could respond, the space around us shifted. The flowing lights, the infinite strands of energy, and even the sense of stillness vanished in an instant. Suddenly, I was somewhere else. I found myself standing in what looked like an endless control room, but not a control room built by human hands. The air shimmered with energy, and vast streams of light moved like highways, stretching in all directions. In front of me, there was a massive, radiant display, a living map of the world, glowing with pulsating lights of different intensities. Gabriel gestured toward it. "This is where prayer meets reality." I looked closer. Each light on the map represented an active prayer. Some glowed intensely, forming clear pathways that connected them to events in the world. Others flickered weakly, struggling to break through. Then Gabriel pointed to a specific stream of golden light. "Watch carefully." I turned my focus toward the glowing strand, and suddenly I was there, transported into the very heart of the prayer's impact. I stood in a dimly lit hospital room. A woman, Sarah, a mother in New York, was sitting beside a hospital bed, gripping the frail hand of her teenage son, Daniel. He had been in a coma for weeks after a devastating accident. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered a prayer, her voice trembling with desperation. "Please, God, please don't take my son. I can't do this without him." Her prayer flowed into the spiritual realm, appearing as a powerful golden current surging upward. Unlike the weak and scattered prayers I had seen before, hers was fierce, unwavering, raw with love and faith. I watched as the prayer pierced through the unseen barriers, reaching something I hadn't noticed before, a convergence of divine intervention. And then I saw the miracle begin to unfold. The golden prayer energy didn't just float into the air, it activated a chain reaction in the physical world. First, I saw Daniel's brain activity flicker, his neural pathways responding to the surge of spiritual energy. At the same time, I saw a doctor down the hall suddenly remember an experimental treatment he had read about years ago, one that could give Daniel a fighting chance. Meanwhile, a nurse who had been quietly listening to Sarah's prayers felt a sudden urge to comfort her. She reached out, took her hand, and began praying with her, strengthening the connection. The golden thread of prayer was no longer alone. More lights began to join it, intertwining, amplifying the power of the request. Then in a single breathtaking moment, Daniel's fingers twitched. Sarah gasped, her breath catching in her throat. She leaned in closer. "Daniel? Daniel, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered. A weak groan escaped his lips. And in that moment, I understood. Prayer was never just words spoken into silence. It was a living force, shaping reality in ways far beyond human comprehension. I turned back to Gabriel, my mind reeling. "So every prayer has power?" His expression darkened slightly. "Not all prayers are the same." He gestured toward another thread of energy. This one was dim, weak, and fractured. It drifted uncertainly, fading before it could reach its destination. I followed its path and found myself inside a different home. A man sat in his living room, half-heartedly muttering a prayer while scrolling through his phone. "God, I guess I could use some help. But whatever happens, happens." His words lacked faith, lacked conviction. It was a prayer offered out of routine, without expectation, without trust. And so, it barely left the ground. I watched as the weak prayer dissipated, lost before it could even reach the web of light. "Why did that one fail?" I asked. Gabriel turned to me, his gaze steady. "Because he did not believe." I thought back to all the times I had prayed with doubt in my heart, not truly believing that my prayers would change anything. How many of my own prayers had vanished into nothingness? True prayer, Gabriel continued, is not begging for a wish to be granted. It is an act of faith, a participation in the divine process of creation. Gabriel raised his hand, and suddenly a new vision unfolded before me. I saw a group of people, a church congregation in Texas, gathered in a circle, hands clasped, praying for a missing child. Unlike the scattered, weak prayers I had seen before, their prayers intertwined, forming a powerful current of light. Their combined energy surged forward, illuminating the path to an answer. In the physical world, a search team member, exhausted and ready to give up, suddenly felt a strong conviction to check an area that had already been searched. He followed the pull of that intuition, and moments later, he found the missing child, alive. I gasped, overwhelmed by what I was witnessing. This is why Jesus said, "Where 2 or 3 gather in my name, I am with them," Gabriel said. Collective prayer creates a resonance, an amplification that can change the course of events. I turned to Gabriel, my heart pounding. "I never understood this before." "That is why you were brought here," he said, "so that you may tell others." For so long, I had seen prayer as a simple request to God, a hope thrown into the universe. But now I understood. Prayer was not just asking, it was joining in the very work of creation itself. I had spent so much of my life praying weak, hesitant prayers, never fully believing, never truly expecting change. That would end today. I would never pray the same way again. The weight of what I had seen pressed against my soul. Prayer was not a mere wish, a desperate plea flung into the unknown. It was a living force, an act of faith that interacted with reality itself. Yet I had also seen the weakness of some prayers, the ones that barely flickered, that faded before they could reach their destination. And I knew I had prayed those prayers myself. Gabriel turned toward me, his radiant form pulsing with energy. "Come," he said, "there is still more you must understand." Suddenly, the divine control room faded, and I found myself standing inside a small, dimly lit apartment in Chicago. The air was heavy with grief. A woman, Rebecca, knelt beside her bed, sobbing into her hands. Her shoulders shook as she whispered a desperate prayer. "God, please, I need a miracle. I don't know how much more I can take." The desperation in her voice was raw, cutting deep. But as I looked upward, following the energy of her prayer, I gasped. Her prayer wasn't moving. Instead, it hovered just above her, flickering weakly. It wasn't breaking through the barrier between the physical and spiritual realms. It was as if something was holding it back. I turned to Gabriel, my voice trembling. "Why isn't her prayer reaching through?" He gazed at Rebecca with deep compassion. "She prays, but she does not believe. Her heart is heavy with doubt, and without faith, her prayer has no power." My chest tightened. I had done this so many times. I had prayed with fear, with worry, with hesitation, doubting if God was really listening. And now, standing here in the spiritual realm, I finally understood the truth. A prayer offered without faith is like a candle without a flame. But then something changed. A knock echoed at Rebecca's door. She wiped her tears, hesitating before standing. When she opened the door, her neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Johnson, stood there holding a small bag of groceries. "I just felt like I should check on you," Mrs. Johnson said softly. Rebecca's lip quivered. She let out a shaky breath, her walls breaking down. She hadn't told anyone she had lost her job. She hadn't told anyone she had been eating 1 meal a day to make sure her son had enough. But God knew, and He had sent an answer, through someone else. I turned to Gabriel, my voice hushed in awe. "So, sometimes the answer to a prayer doesn't come the way we expect?" He nodded. "God's ways are higher than yours. When people pray with faith, they open doors. But they must also learn to recognize the answers when they come." The most powerful prayers. Gabriel lifted his hand, and suddenly I was standing in a church in Atlanta. A group of people had gathered in a circle, hands clasped, their voices strong with conviction. They were praying for a man named Marcus, a former gang member who had been arrested the week before. His mother stood in the center, eyes shut tight, gripping her Bible as she prayed with all her might. Lord, I declare in your name that Marcus is not lost. He is yours and you will deliver him. Break every chain holding him back and bring him home in Jesus' name. The room shook with power. I saw their prayers surge upward, blazing like fire. Unlike Rebecca's hesitant plea, these prayers were unstoppable, fierce, alive with faith. And then, I saw the answer unfolding in real time. Miles away in a cold prison cell, Marcus sat on the edge of his bunk, head in his hands. Anger, regret, and hopelessness had wrapped around him like chains. But then, something changed. A guard walked past, pausing at Marcus's cell. Your mother's been praying for you, he said casually. She called again today. Marcus barely reacted. His mother had been praying for him his whole life, and look where he was now. Then it happened. A sudden warmth flooded the cell, wrapping around Marcus like an unseen presence. He gasped, his heart pounding. Tears welled in his eyes as he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. He reached under his cot, pulling out the worn Bible his mother had given him years ago. His hands shook as he opened it, flipping to a page he had never noticed before. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11. Marcus broke. For the first time in his life, he dropped to his knees and prayed. Not out of desperation, but out of surrender. And in that moment, I saw his mother's prayer reach him like a tidal wave, breaking through the darkness, flooding his heart with light. Tears blurred my vision. This was what true prayer did. I turned back to Gabriel, my heart burning. I understand now. The difference isn't in the words, it's in the faith behind them. He nodded. Faith is the power behind every prayer. But the most powerful prayers, the ones that shake heaven and earth, share three things. He lifted three fingers. 1, they are prayed with complete faith, without doubt. I thought of Rebecca's prayer and how her doubt had held it back. 2, they align with God's will. I thought of Marcus's mother. She hadn't prayed for money or revenge or escape. She had prayed for her son's deliverance, and God had answered. 3, they are prayed with love, not selfishness. I thought of the people praying for Marcus, for the missing child, for each other. They weren't just asking for themselves. They were standing in the gap for others. Gabriel's gaze pierced into me. This is why Jesus said, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. But only when you pray with faith, with alignment, and with love. I swallowed hard. I had prayed selfishly. I had prayed without faith. I had prayed small prayers when God was calling me to pray big ones. And I knew in that moment, everything about how I prayed would change. The weight of everything I had witnessed pressed deep into my soul. I had seen prayers weave through reality, influencing moments, decisions, and even physical bodies. I had seen prayers fall flat, powerless due to doubt, selfishness, or lack of faith. I had seen prayers that shook heaven itself, opening divine pathways, changing the course of lives. And now Gabriel was looking at me with a finality that made my heart pound. It is time for you to return. Panic flared in me. Return? Suddenly I became aware of something I hadn't noticed before. A pulling sensation, distant at first, but growing stronger, like an invisible force tethering me back to the world I had left behind. I turned to Gabriel. But there's so much more I need to learn, so much more I need to see. His radiant form pulsed with compassion. You have seen enough for now. What remains is for you to act. The pulling grew stronger. The brilliant tapestry of prayer around me began to blur. The realm of light and energy started fading. Wait, I pleaded. What am I supposed to do with all of this? Gabriel stepped forward, his presence filling every part of me with warmth and purpose. You will tell them. You will show them. You will teach them how to pray, not as beggars, but as co-creators with God. And then with one final surge of light, I was falling. I crashed back into my body with an intensity that sent electricity surging through every nerve. Pain, raw, searing, unforgiving pain, slammed into me, and I sucked in a deep, gasping breath. The sound of voices erupted around me, shouts, beeping monitors, the chaotic energy of an emergency room. "She's back!" someone yelled. I tried to move, but my body felt like it had been shattered into pieces. Through the blinding overhead lights, I saw doctors and nurses scrambling around me, eyes wide with disbelief. One of them, a nurse with red-rimmed eyes, gripped my wrist as if she couldn't believe I was real. "Oh my God," she whispered. "We were about to call it. You were gone." I blinked, struggling to form words. I was gone. I had been dead for 7 minutes and 42 seconds. But I had returned, and I knew I hadn't come back empty-handed. The days that followed were a blur of hospital rooms, tests, and hushed conversations about how it was medically impossible that I had survived, let alone without brain damage. But the real change wasn't in my body, it was in my spirit. I could still sense the web of prayer, though it was fainter now, like trying to hear a melody through a closed door. But more than that, I could see the difference in people's prayers. A nurse prayed for her mother absent-mindedly while scrolling on her phone. Weak, scattered light. A doctor whispered a silent but heartfelt plea for wisdom before making a crucial decision. A steady, strong beam of gold. A chaplain prayed with a patient's family, their voices full of hope despite the tears in their eyes. Their prayers intertwined, forming a powerful surge of energy. The world had not changed, but I had, and I could no longer stay silent. My first real test came just a week after I was discharged from the hospital. I was sitting with little Michael, my young asthma patient, and his mother. She was exhausted, eyes hollow from sleepless nights, holding on to her son's tiny hand as machines beeped softly around him. "I've been praying," she whispered, "but nothing's happening." I felt something stir deep inside me. "How have you been praying?" I asked gently. She blinked, caught off guard. I don't know. I just asked God to help him." I took her hands in mine. "Let me show you what I learned." For the first time in my life, I prayed not out of habit, not out of uncertainty, but out of the deep, undeniable knowledge that prayer was real. I visualized Michael's tiny lungs wrapped in the intricate patterns of healing energy I had seen in the spiritual realm. I spoke life over him, declaring with faith that his body would align with God's design. I invited his mother to pray alongside me, teaching her to see prayer not as a desperate plea, but as a direct participation in the work of healing. And as we prayed, I felt it, the shift, the connection, the power. Michael's breathing grew steadier. The next morning, his oxygen levels improved dramatically. A week later, he was strong enough to go home. Word spread fast. People wanted to know what had changed in me, why my prayers felt different, why there were unexplainable breakthroughs when I prayed with them. So I started teaching. At first, it was just a small group in my home, but soon churches, hospitals, and prayer circles began inviting me to speak. I showed them what Gabriel had shown me. Pray with faith, not with doubt. Align your prayers with God's will. Pray with love, not selfishness. Understand that prayer is an active force, not a passive request. And the more people prayed this way, the more miracles followed. Families were reconciled. People found healing, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Doors that had been shut for years swung open, and perhaps most powerfully, I saw corporate prayers transform entire communities. In a city where violence had been rising, churches came together, praying not just for safety, but for transformation. I watched as crime rates dropped, as programs for troubled youth suddenly received funding, as hardened hearts began to soften. I had seen it in the spiritual realm, and now I was seeing it on earth. One night, months after my near-death experience, I sat on my porch looking up at the sky. For a brief moment, I thought I saw it, the web of light stretching across the world, holding it together. Gabriel's final words echoed in my heart. Tell them their prayers matter more than they know. So that's what I do now. I tell people. I teach them. I help them see what I saw. Because prayer isn't just talking to God. It is shaping reality. It is moving mountains. It is joining in the divine act of creation itself. And the moment we understand this, truly understand it, we will never pray the same way again. My near-death experience did more than just bring me back from the brink. It transformed me. Before that day, I had taken prayer lightly, treating it as a last resort, a whispered hope when things got tough. But now I know better. Prayer is not just words spoken into the void. It is a force, a reality-shaping, life-changing, divine partnership between us and God. I came back with a mission, not just to tell my story, but to teach people how to pray differently. Because the truth is, most people don't realize just how powerful their prayers can be. They pray without faith, without expectation, without alignment to God's will, and then wonder why nothing changes. But I've seen the difference. I've seen what happens when people pray with boldness, conviction, and love. I've seen prayers stop violence, restore families, heal bodies, and change destinies. And I've seen what happens when we come together in corporate prayer, when voices rise as one, when faith ignites in a group, when we collectively call on heaven to move. The 3 takeaways that changed my life. If there's one thing I want people to remember from my experience, it's this. Prayer is not a passive act. It is active participation in God's work. Every prayer sends real energy into motion. You are not just asking, you are creating. Faith is the key that unlocks the power of prayer. Doubt kills prayers before they ever take flight. The strongest prayers are spoken with certainty. Collective prayer magnifies results. When we pray together, our prayers amplify, creating unstoppable movements in the spirit. A call to pray differently. I challenge you, pray differently. Don't just throw words into the air. Speak with faith, authority, and expectation. Pray knowing that God is listening and that your words have weight. And if you don't see an answer right away, don't stop. Some prayers work instantly. Others build over time. Some shift things in ways we don't expect. But every prayer, when spoken in faith, creates change. This world is held together by the prayers of the faithful. Be one of them. Pray like it matters, because it does.